Okay. Yay! Hello, everybody. I'm super excited today. And I was going to ask you before we started exactly to make sure I was saying your name right. So is it Camila Noordeloos?
Noordeloos.
Noordeloos.
And I'm still learning this. It's my husband's maiden name. And it's like we were saying earlier, it's Dutch. I'm from Brazil. So the doesn't really cross the language so well. But
what is your maiden name?
Baldassi, which is Italian. It should be like Baldacci. So it's kind of like a mix of culture everywhere. So complicated.
So I'm super excited because I don't know you very well. Met you one time at Accelerate Michigan. And then I think maybe in passing one other time. And I was like, oh, I'm going to make her be my best friend. And then I was like, or there'll be winter in a global pandemic and we'll just never speak again. So I was super excited to have you on my show. I feel like strange saying that, but I guess it's
I'm super excited, Emily, to be here. I feel honored for the invite, and I think I shared some of your comments. And when I saw you at Accelerate Michigan, I was like, wow, this is a badass. She's making this happen, like giving us orders all the way around and really making sure that everyone was extracting from the
especially when we're that's really funny that you say that, because definitely, like, especially when we're running like an event like that where there's like literally 10,000 different moving parts. At that point, I just start yelling at everybody. Like, I'm just like, go over here now.
We need it
right now. Some people are always like, I was like very scared, but it worked out. So I'm like, there's a method to the madness. So I'm super excited. You are not new to Michigan, but like you've been at Grand Ventures about a year now, almost exactly a year.
A year and a half.
Okay. And Tim, who quite a few people know, had founded Grand Ventures, and he was at Huron River Ventures before, and has done a lot of work in Chicago and stuff. And so I was like, so I'm excited to see like all these people that he's adding to your guys' team. And then you have kind of a cool background. You were at GE before, and had kind of like come through operations and as like more within corporate venture, and then had gotten your master's and then got more into venture capital. Do you want to like talk a little bit about like your path there?
Yes. So I started with, I'm from Brazil and I moved to the US 10 years ago. I started with GE and I was doing corporate finance at their headquarters in Connecticut. So I did that for 2 years, and then GE started to develop their corporate venture capital arm. And I had zero idea what venture capital was at the time. I literally had no idea what it was. But my husband was being transferred to California for his work. And I went to GE and said, hey, I'm leaving if I cannot find a job in California with you guys. So they said, no, hold on, and let's get you somewhere. And then put me in at GE Ventures. And I'm like, okay, I have no idea.
They do like a ton of really cool stuff. Like, I feel like I regularly see them in the news, right? About
they went through many changes last year with everything happening at GE. But we went from when we established GE Ventures in 2013, we went from like 30 investments that we brought in from GE Capital to, I would say, 150 within like 3 or 4 years. So it was really growing like crazy. And it was super exciting because GE Ventures was almost like a startup itself. We were creating a new company within GE and operated differently and separately from GE. And we were in that phase of creating things from scratch and building the foundation to grow fast. So it was awesome. I would say that was a little bit of an operational experience right there on how to create a business from scratch. And we were like 15 people to over 100 when I left GE. So it was awesome. It was super fast paced, but there was one thing that lacked from the true entrepreneurial experience and startup experience, and it was the limited resources aspect of it. And I don't say just capital. Obviously, we had to justify our needs to GE and constantly ask for the money that we were going to use. but but we would get it. And also, GE is so big. It's so all over the place. We had access to everything we needed: lawyers, experts, business units, people with PhDs in every single thing you can possibly imagine.
Yeah. I feel like that's really kind of cool about like corporate venture, of just like the resources available to a corporate venture fund are like just crazy.
Yeah,
And
it is.
if they are enabling that business unit to kind of like operate slightly independently and not just be like sort of like stodgy inside the silo. Like I feel like that is like such a cool thing.
That was the benefit of our corporate venture, especially how we worked at GE as a corporate venture capital fund. So after doing that for a while and seeing that I really liked venture capital and I wanted to continue to grow through that career, I went to GE and said, hey, I get it. But now that I'm taking like more board observer seats and I'm getting more involved in the deals and I'm learning, meeting with CEOs, I need to understand what their day-to-day truly is. And that's the beauty of GE. Like I had amazing leaders that would support me on things and crazy ideas that I had. And I said, can I just go to one of our portfolio companies? I can train someone to do my job for a few months. And can I just be like a chief of staff or something, like the right arm of the CEO of one of our portfolio companies? And then I joined Zinc, one of our portfolio companies in San Francisco, for 4 to 5 months. And it was incredible because I actually was able to see all of that building and growing and moving fast, but also with the challenges of limited resources. So I got involved in many different projects with different functions. And it was awesome. And I think that experience, that operational experience within a startup, really built additional, I would say, empathy and respect for the CEOs. I think it's very different to sit in a board and with experience, give them advice on what could be done. Yeah. But it's hard to actually do it. Like the textbook says it, but go do it yourself. It's hard.
Yeah. And I feel like that is like a big topic a lot of times in the Midwest that people talk about, is that a lot of times the early stage investors are coming out of finance instead of coming out of like being on the operating side or on the startup side. And so like in like San Francisco, you find a lot of the investors were not out of finance. They like started companies and that's how they made their money, is that they had like a successful exit and then they decided to become a venture capitalist or an angel investor or whatever. And so a lot of people do kind of feel like there's like a rift in the Midwest between like the investor community and the startup community, maybe just because of that. So I think that's really interesting, like when people have operator experience.
Yeah, and I think you're right. A lot of the VCs I would meet in the West Coast were VCs that were at a startup before, led a group or a team in a specific function of the startup, had a successful exit or something, and went and started their own fund or decided to do this their own. But you see more and more very successful VCs that hasn't had that operation experience necessarily with a startup, but and a lot of people are starting to value that too, that outsider view that is not so attached to the passion or this and that, and can really bring the CEO back to say, hey, you got to look at things in this way too. So
yeah, I could definitely see that. And I feel like too, I think that's like on the startup to like make sure that they're vetting their investors really well, so that they have kind of like a mix on their board. Because
exactly,
for people who are going to watch this and are like, I don't know much about venture capital. So a lot of times when a venture capitalist invests in a startup company, they, are getting an equity stake in the company, but they also take a board seat. So this, but I'm just saying for people who are watching this and being like, I don't know what you're talking about. So a lot of times we'll take a board seat, but I think that a lot of startups, especially like the really, really good ones, are being very careful on who they're selecting as their investors, because they're not just going to give a portion of their company and a board seat to just anybody. and kind of having that balance on their board between people who are like, maybe really good at finance or really have good connections in some geographic location that they want to expand into or whatever. Like, it seems like that's like would be really helpful to have operators as well as finance guys.
Yeah, building a diverse board is as important as building a diverse leadership team. And it's just that difference in thoughts and ideas that is going to enrich the discussions and make you and help you to go through the best solution. So it's important. The startups that have the ability to pick and choose the investors should be very careful and really analyze who and how they're going to add value for sure.
Yeah. And then how did you find your way? So after GE Ventures and joining the startup, then what brought you to Michigan eventually?
So I joined this startup and I was doing, you mentioned my MBA, I was doing all of that with my MBA at the same time. So my husband and I had reached a point of big cities and we said, you know what, we need a break. And I actually got really confused when I joined this startup because I really enjoy this smaller team and the go get it and do your own type of mentality. And at GE, to a certain extent, at GE Ventures, we started small, but we started growing so much that everyone's starting to become more and more in their own little box. Yeah. So you start not being able to touch everything as you like. So I think at that point I was questioning, like, do I like where things are? So we said, you know what, we need a break. Let's rethink, let's get inspired again. And we took a sabbatical. The plan was to move to Chicago, which is closer to family because my husband is from here in West Michigan. And then when we took a sabbatical and rethought everything, we said, you know what? No more big city. Let's make a change. Like Michigan would need our skills way more than Chicago does. We can make an impact in a region like Michigan than we would in another big city again. So we were very happy with the decision we took. I'm extremely happy that I joined Brand Ventures because it's a combination of, hey, I can still do venture capital, but it's still a small VC that I can touch everything and that get exposed to all aspects, which I was losing a little bit of that when I was at G because we were growing so much. Yeah. So to be more boxed, but so it was a great journey and a great change. We came back and it just felt good to be refreshed, and it felt great to join this entrepreneurial ecosystem and feel like we're helping the community and the state become more attractive to other investors too and startups. Like there's a lot here, and we should, continue to build a strong ecosystem for sure.
Yeah, that's definitely like one of the things. I was even talking to somebody about that this morning about just kind of the role of venture capital and how like these startup communities are really just such good, just from like an economics perspective, like such good attractors of capital, because they do have like some local investors, but they attract a ton of capital from outside of the state as well. So it's kind of and like we're just seeing in the research that we do, whether it's like on the impact of like COVID on the economy or just local communities that we're analyzing, that like it really having a strong tech community really has kind of a balancing and like foundational effect on a community. So like the communities that have a stronger tech ecosystem are seeing less impact on their local economy because they kind of have this like outside capital and like outside influences coming in than like communities that don't have as strong of a tech community. So it's been interesting. So like just seeing like during the pandemic, all of the stuff that's going on and like how it's affecting different areas. So this is what always happens is I ask you a bunch of questions and then I realize that I haven't asked you any of the questions. And then I'm like, what question?
No, I like the kind of format.
So I will ask you. See, this is phase one of becoming best friends. Um, so according to, so we do a research report for the Michigan Venture Capital Association every year. And so in their 2020 MVCA research report, we saw that, and this was the first year I actually have seen this shift, is that large corporations weren't as common of a funding source for venture capital firms locally as they maybe once were over the last few years. Because like usually we see like corporations are like one of the most popular places that venture capital firms fundraise from. But then this last year, like kind of dropped down the list. Like, do you think, like, why do you think that might be? I'll just be like, if you had to pontificate on that, like, why do you think that might be?
And again, this is not based on any research that I did, but from my experience at GE, and for the same reasons that we created GE Ventures, I think what big corporations are realizing is that startups can completely kill a business or a business unit or a segment. Traditionally, the way that they do innovation is they would have research centers, innovations teams, and GE had a research center in India, Brazil, here, massive, a lot of people, really smart, working on new technology, creating new patents and all of these things. But typically it's very related to what they're offering today. Big corporations, typically public companies, they're thinking maybe 2 quarters ahead, but they don't have the ability, because they will be punished by the market, to think 10 years ahead. So what happens is, what if a startup comes and completely kills a segment? Yeah, for example, the GE could be making, and we would, improving our MRI machines every year, better and better every day. Well, what if a startup comes and creates something that, hey, you don't need that anymore. There's something much better that's way cheaper, that gives better visibility in this and that. So that's what I think big corporations starting to realize that there's a risk for that. And if you want to be in the forefront for a long time and continue to be a leader in the market, you need to stay in touch with what's going on. So I think the big corporations that were maybe giving money, being LPs for some of the typical venture capital funds, they started to realize, oh, you know what? We're going to create our own corporate venture capital arm. And in that, you've seen a rise of corporate venture capital funds out there. One, because they can now have way more access to the startups that they invest in, which they have more information, more contact. They can build a bridge with their innovation team and put them to work together. When you're an LP, you don't have that much access, direct access to the startup. And they can also control what are the investments that they're making. When you're an LP, you don't typically control them. Like, you can invest in a certain type of fund, but you don't truly control, like, oh, I'm going to invest in this startup versus this startup as an LP. So I think it's just staying more connected and not stopping what they were doing from an innovation perspective. They still have their research center. They still do things internally, but having that external view has become more and more important. And that's why a lot of VCs are doing more, not VCs, sorry, corporations are doing more of the CVC type of
I don't know what I think of that. This might be like the venture capital fangirl in me, but like, I feel like on one hand, if a corporate venture fund invests in or corporation invests in venture capital firms, like they would have access to all of those portfolio companies, and they should be able to keep like a more broad eye, but maybe it's just that they don't necessarily aren't able to spend time on like getting to know all of those things.
We thought, for example, at GE at some point, what if we invested in other funds? And I think the challenge for us, it was that loss in control. And I can't speak to all the corporations, but it's that loss of control of, okay, I could invest in a healthcare fund, but it could be so broad. They might be investing in things that it is completely out
Yeah.
of what GE does. And not, I mean, we were making investments that the business unit wouldn't approve necessarily because they're like, no, this is completely off. But we would be like, nope, this is where healthcare is going. We're going to do it. But still, within that umbrella of healthcare, you could still invest in things that GE would be completely off. So we would lose a little bit of that control. We would lose a little bit of the inside information of being on the board for that company. And I think at that point we wanted more of that control, like more visibility to everything going on.
Yeah. So I guess it would be like why you were investing. Like maybe if the corporation was investing for just for returns and was like, I don't really care whatever technologies they do, then maybe that would be a better strategy for them. But if it was like, well, we're investing because we want access to the technology and access to that space, then like you would want to just do it yourself.
Yes. It's a combination.
Say that again.
It's a combination of strategic and financial reasons, for sure.
Oh, all of those things. Okay. So I'm like, so what questions haven't I asked you? You've lived in various countries as well as various cities within the US. And what are some of the strengths that stood out to you most about the Midwest entrepreneurial ecosystem?
I think those common comments about the Midwest people applies to the entrepreneurial ecosystem. I think when you think of Midwestern, we think like nice, friendly, humble, and you can trust. You can do business with them and trust them. And I think I feel that way compared to other, having lived in the East and West Coast, at least, or being from Brazil. But then I see that in the entrepreneurial ecosystem where, everyone, if I ask to meet with someone, people be extremely friendly to have a coffee with me, independently of what my level in their organization. Like I'm a principal at Grand Ventures, but when I first came here, I needed to grow my network, and I went to different regions. I went to Chicago, I went to Indianapolis, and I'm making all these phone calls and with partners, which sometimes if you try to do that in the West Coast, they'll be like, no, you go meet with another principal, or you're going to meet with my associate. I don't have time for this. So very low ego, very humble. I think it's because we know too that we need to be friendly to each other. We are, there are limited access to capital sometimes. And even when we are leading a deal, we need syndicate, we need partners. So we all need to learn how to work together. And I think that's something that I felt very welcomed, and I felt like a warm, ecosystem here in the Midwest while I was trying to meet all these people to expand my network. So and then meeting with the startup community in general, I think there is a sense of trust, even if we think, oh, okay, no, the CEO, he's not really saying, or she's not really saying something right here. But I don't think there's a intentional thing behind it. I don't get that energy that they are intentionally trying to take advantage of something from you.
Too much of wheelers and dealers or anything like that. I think that is true. And I think people just kind of like, because it's kind of a maker community, like everybody's, parents and grandparents were like, worked in the auto industry or worked in like manufacturing, like sort of make something. Like I feel like a lot of things here are like based on research, based on sound science and things like that. So I think that you do just tend to get like a lot more of a straightforward feel. Although I say that, and I've literally lived in Michigan forever, so I don't know why I would be comparing it to anywhere else. I'm like, I know everything. Yeah, I like that though. That's really interesting. Okay, what do you think is one thing that the Midwest venture community, the venture capital community could do to become more inclusive and diverse?
That's a hard question.
I know. I'm like, that's why I just say one thing. So it doesn't necessarily have to be one thing for everybody. One thing that you think.
Obviously, I'm a woman. I'm a Latina. I work in venture capital. So I'm definitely a minority in this world, and I am a strong believer of diversity, and but I'm not an expert by any means, or I've done tons of research. I know I was very lucky through my career that I had amazing examples of what truly works, and I'm saying this because I will give you my answer why what I think it's most important. One is GE Ventures was led by a woman. The CEO of GE Ventures was a woman. It was badass, very well known in Silicon Valley, and I think because of that, we were able to build a team that it was extremely diverse. We had different races, different genders. We had everything. So I remember my boss was a white male, and he always joked, "Yeah, I don't know about this whole thing about being, we be the one most represented because here in this office, I am minority." I'm like, "Yeah, you be quiet, you're the minority." And it was true, and I think it's because once you build a diverse team, that will continue to rip the effects across the board, because that woman has expanded networks, not only with male, which is already dominant in this industry, but also she has networks with other women. And then she brings some women because she opens the new job search or, positions to a broader group of people. So I think what needs to be done more from the venture capital community is lead by example. I am a strong believer of leading by example. And I give kudos to Tim a lot because he truly built a diverse team at Grand Ventures. We're a team of, in the day-to-day, we're a team of 4. 2 of them are women. We are diverse from a nationality perspective and background perspective. We're diverse from a gender perspective. We're diverse from a generation perspective. Like Tim is a super old guy. I'm kind of normal. I hope so.
Yeah.
And we have like our associates, which is a new generation, and it's challenging us constantly.
Yeah.
But because of that, it's very interesting. Like recently we did an analysis in our portfolio companies. We have 12 portfolio companies today. And by any means, this is perfect. But it's way better than other VCs where 50% of our portfolio companies are either women, people from a different race or background, or non-white, for example. So we didn't do anything intentionally. We didn't go and say, we will create a diverse portfolio and that's what we're going to do because we want to build that story. We just started by inside. And by doing that internally, you're already bringing people that thinks differently, that has different bias, because we all do have bias. Like there's no way. It's about understanding what our biases are, but we all have biases. But I have a certain bias, Tim has a different bias, and vice versa. And by doing that internally, we naturally go look for deals in different places. We go look and talk with different people. We get along with different people differently.
Yeah.
That brings a more diverse pipeline. So I think it starts internally. I think we can, as venture capitalists, we can donate hours here. Well, I donate hours to Start Garden, to some of their entrepreneurs. I donate hours for CEOs that are females and mentor them. But until we actually make the change internally, a lot of these things are not going to happen. And so that's where I would start. And I think that when I say I give kudos to Tim, it's because it's easy said than done. When you build a diverse team, that means that you're going to have really tough conversations, because now people are not just agreeing with you. People are actually saying, no, you're wrong. And managing that conflict, but in a healthy way, so that continues to bring it up, so that you can bring good solutions to things. That's that's where the key is. It's really nice to say, yeah, let's build a diverse team and not think about, okay, a diverse team means that I'm not going to have everyone saying, yes, this looks great. Of course. I'm going to be like, no, this is terrible. You think wrong. And it's like,
that's such a good point too, that it's like, yeah, you can't, it's not necessarily easy if you're like a, white male venture capitalist, like founder of a venture capital firm, to like then know how to reach outside of your own network in order to hire people that are not necessarily within your white male community. And it's same with everybody. Like everybody's community generally looks like them because you're most comfortable working with the people that are like you. But then it is just like, once you've hired those people, you can't be like, hey, done. It's like still then like working through those tough conversations.
That's where the work begins.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And I do like you said, give a lot of kudos to Tim, because I know when he was first looking into hiring, he was like, I want to grow my team and all of that. He was like very blatant in reaching out and being like, if anybody knows, like, I want to hire women, I want to hire people of color, that was like very forefront in the message that he was sending to people when he was asking for candidates. And I think that's something like a lot of people feel like nervous to do, but I think is like really how, if you're explicit about it, people are like, oh, I do know somebody that would be really good. Like here's, and they know who to refer over, versus kind of just not saying that. But
yeah, and it doesn't mean necessarily hiring someone that is not the right fit, but in making sure that your pipeline of candidates includes others.
Yeah.
Because I think that's the thing. Like when we start putting the word out there, our network is going to be limited to our network. And sometimes it's a very non-diverse network. So then you only get a certain type of Ivy League schools and blah, blah. So you need to be willing to get beyond that. Like, no, fine, I'm going to interview those people too. But I also want to interview people from different schools and different backgrounds and different socioeconomic backgrounds. So all of that needs to come together. And then you can choose, but intentionally hiring for a diverse team is just making sure that your diversity of thought in discussions will lead to good decisions. And I think we are doing good decisions at Grand Ventures, and discussions are feels enriched by the different, mindsets.
Yeah.
But I think that, it's just tougher. It's not easy. You have to manage that, and at the same time, continue to motivate people to share their opinion, even if they're not moving forward, because we can't move forward with every opinion, right?
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
I
like that.
I would say starting from within, it will really help, because you will bring a pipeline that is larger for your potential deals and investments.
And we do see that track with even that MVCA report. There's a analysis, like a high level analysis of diversity within the venture community and the venture backed company community. And you do see a tracking of like when there are like less female investors, there tends to be less companies led by women that are funded, and when there are less people of color that are in the investment community, you see the less as well. So it's kind of like you do see those tracking. I think right now, like it's not just with like the size of the community. I think that it's a little bit loose, but it definitely is there. Like the years that we have less women, there's less women getting funded. So it's so I think that's definitely proving out. So my last question before I end up talking to you all day is, what is something, this was a fun one, what is something you're looking forward to doing this fall?
Oh yeah, with all of this going on.
Oh, I
know. Actually, just last night, I did a crazy move and I booked a flight to Brazil, which a lot of people are going to say that I'm crazy. I know. But I have a deal with my husband that I need to go home every year. And I haven't been home for almost 2 years. So my fuel tank is getting low. It's getting really low. I need to see my family. I'm a very much like a relationship person. And I bought the tickets because I can cancel. So we'll see how things are in October. I actually need to fly out, and there's a possibility that I will have to cancel. But technology has helped, I know, but there's nothing like a true hug. And I need to see my family. So I'm looking forward to that. You know, Brazil is, despite the media, is no different than the US from a case perspective and everything, and how it's growing or not, it's exactly the same. So, yeah.
Well, excited. I'll see my fingers.
I'm not gonna do much there, but at least I will see the people I love. So,
yeah, you'll be able to go there and
like. What are you looking for this fall?
Oh God, fall. What am I looking for? Oh my God, the tables have been turned. I don't even know. I feel like I just love fall. Fall's like the best season. Yeah. Although this year I'm a little bit hesitant because I feel like winter is going to be really hard just without being able to like go over to people's houses and like go inside and stuff and staying outside when it's so cold. So I feel like fall is almost the precursor to that. But I think our neighborhood doesn't tend to get a lot of trick-or-treaters or anything. So I was kind of like, maybe this year I should just tell everybody that like I have a 1 and 4-year-olds, and I'm like, maybe we should just dress up and then we'll tell everyone nobody else is allowed to do trick-or-treating, just us. We'll go trick-or-treating. But so maybe that would be some cool fall activity, but I'm not sure. We'll have to see. But yeah, I'll keep my fingers crossed though that like cases will not go up too high, and then you'll be able to.
Hopefully, yes. Let's just hope things continue, just slow down a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. Okay. Well, thank you so much for being on, and I will hopefully talk to you soon. And I appreciate it so much.
Yes. Thank you. This was great. Talk to you.
See you.